Alright, good morning. Shalom, everybody. I'll try to make this quick because I'm supposed to be killing mosquitoes. And it's almost the other way around right now. Chapter 1. Wait. Oh. Okay, so. In memory of Christopher's sign, I guess I'm still holding out hope that he faked his own death, but I don't know. Okay, so. Chapter 1 of Secret on the Tarmac. Yesterday I read the preface, so you can go back and watch that one. Chapter 1. Nothing to see here. Trust is a powerful word. Trust is earned. It can take years to earn trust, and trust can be ripped away in a split second. Let me guide you down my road to trust, or lack thereof. I was a rookie reporter in Montgomery, Alabama. I worked alone. We called it one-man banding. Today, media companies call it MMJ or multimedia journalists. Siren in the background. Always pray for your first responders and everybody that's involved. Hopefully it was just a fender bender. Armed with my camera and battery belt around my waist, tripod and microphone, I left in the ABC 32 white minivan with no hubcaps to my first breaking news. I drove for what felt like hours, pressing the gas through yellow lights, praying for green lights. The van smelled like stale burlap. It had one bench seat in the rear, which was covered with a stack of fast food paper bags filled with food debris from yesterday's news cycle. As I finally pulled up on the scene in the shadows of Maxwell Air Force Base, I realized I wasn't the first news crew on the scene, but at least I wasn't last. The call involved a gunshot wound. The victim was an 8-year-old, shot by his 6-year-old brother. I was told by a neighbor that the boys found the gun under their parents' bed, and while the two boys were playing and wrestling, the gun went off. Montgomery Police Department officers quickly put up crime scene tape to keep us at bay. Then an officer approached and said the words that make every journalist want to scream and yell as loudly as they can. "Sorry guys, nothing really here, nothing to see. It's over, we're leaving." I knew it was complete bullshit. However, I remember tilting my head thinking, is it over? I watched reporters and photographers from the other stations lean together and whisper to one another. It wasn't long after that. The other news crews took their cameras off the metal tripods, loaded their gear into the cars, and fired up the engines. I'll never forget the confusion as I wondered, wait, they're leaving? I decided I had some video of the scene, and I too would head back to the station to call the public information officer with the police department. As I drove out of the community, the vehicles from the other two stations were parked along the curb, and the crews waved at me. I waved back and turned left up the hill, heading back through town. I noticed as I looked in the rearview mirror, the vehicles from the other TV stations were behind me. Good morning, Doc. As I glanced up a second time, both stations were turning around, thinking I wouldn't see them. I immediately did the same and raced back to see what was going on. As I pulled back into the housing community, I saw the photographers were quickly pulling out their cameras, placing them on tripods, and focusing on the house. I thought, damn, I should do the same. Just as I powered on the Sony Betacam, the body of the child, covered in a white sheet, was wheeled out of the duplex-style home. Directly behind the gurney was a sobbing mother with an older woman who had her arm around her. In what felt like a synchronistic ballet of video, a detective with a single rubber glove then walked out holding the gun and placed it into a large grocery store-style paper bag right in front of our cameras. It felt surreal. I was stunned to see a large gurney with a small body. I slowly processed the parade of people from the home. It was sad. I was sad and stunned. I still had a player mentality to expect the unexpected and continue with the task at hand. I glanced through my viewfinder to make sure the red light was on, to make sure I was still recording. While I felt robotic with the job I had to do, it still felt uneasy. It sounds cliche, but it did feel like something out of a movie. I was sad for the family, but I was also angry. After all, the officers said there was nothing to see. The competition tried to drive me from the scene, and I was alone. I believed everyone around me, and it was almost a significant mistake on my first breaking news story. I later learned the other crews shared information that the events would unfold in 15 minutes, and their goal was to embarrass me because I was the new guy on the block, the rookie reporter who they wanted to embarrass and perhaps bully. The other reporters and photographers wanted me to miss the video and information from the scene. Welcome to the news business. You learn fast to trust your team and your team only, and you learn fast to trust no one else. I learned from a man who no one trusted. I learned from a man who no one trusted at one point, yet everyone learned to trust and adore. Norman Lumpkin was my first boss. That's going to be on the quiz. He was the first black reporter in Alabama. He was the first black anchor in Alabama. He was the first black news director in Alabama. You think I felt betrayed and lied to? Try being a black reporter in the 60s in Alabama. Norman Lumpkin was a hero, trailblazer, and one hell of a teacher. He gave me my first job. He trusted me when no one else did. I met Norman on my way home from an interview at a competing station. As I was driving back to my house and 6 roommates in Tuscaloosa, I saw the ABC logo on a building off the Montgomery roadway. I pulled in, walked in, and asked to speak with the news director. The thin black man who walked with a swagger while trying to suck leftover lunch out of his teeth extended his hand and said, "You think you can be a reporter?" Norman looked at my resume, which consisted of nothing, then glanced at my reference list. My references included Coach Gene Stallings, Coach Mike DuBose, University of Alabama President Andrew Sorensen, and the only teacher who believed in me, Pam Doyle. Pam was a journalism professor who at times would pull me aside for private pep talks. She was like my coach in the classroom. One of her fellow professors told me I would never make it in journalism and that I was wasting my time. Pam didn't operate that way and coached me in current events, presentation, and camera confidence. I knew she would sell my determination to get a story like a car salesman walking the lot on a holiday weekend. She wanted me to do well because she invested so much emotional support into crafting my future. Turns out she would never be called as a reference. Norman giggled, picked up the phone, and said, "Okay, son, let's see." He spoke to Coach Mike DuBose for 15 minutes with sporadic points of seriousness and laughter. Norman hung up the phone and said, "You start next month, and I don't want to hear shit." I talked with Norman about the accidental shooting incident I had covered. He said, "Welcome to the news business, son. Trust no one, question everyone, and don't ever let the viewer down." Little did I know those words would come back to me 19 years later as I was set to break a story that would impact a presidential election. After a little more than a year covering news in Montgomery, it was on to Midland, Texas. I was reminded that people in powerful positions don't like to feel they have no power. From police officers to politicians to businessmen, they all believe the person who holds the key information holds the power. It was 1999, and my photographer Carlos and I were dispatched to an oil well fire quite a distance from the station. We left the KWES NBC 9 studios for the lengthy drive. We knew we had to monitor our time to get back to the studios with the story. Some journalists know the term 30-mile zone. Most people think TMZ is nothing more than a popular website. The zone was a real thing used by movie studios a long time ago. For me, the zone was a real thing in terms of time management. If you were going 30 miles or further, you really had to calculate your time getting to the scene, working the scene, and getting back to the studios to write and edit the story. As it turned out, the fire wasn't an oil field fire, but it was a drilling rig fire. Oil rigs, which are common in West Texas, are the tall platforms visible from miles away. The rig was on fire. I mean, damn, it was on fire. The well-known National Oil and Gas Company lost several vehicles in the fire, and while there were injuries, there were no fatalities. Time was ticking. Carlos was getting basic flame video while we zigzagged across the flat farmland in West Texas. Once we arrived at the area surrounding the fire, we learned the company had a manager on site who had been given permission to provide the media with information. The information was, there's been an incident. That was it. That was all he would say. It was the most jerk-like statement. He went on to say something like, everything was fine and there's no concern. It was comical that he tried to get us to leave like there was not a story on fire behind him. It was the company's way of saying, there's nothing to see here. Yet Carlos's nice zoom lens revealed vehicles on fire and ambulances in position. I asked about injuries and the spokesman only said, there's been an incident, it's under control. Little did the small man wearing the white hard hat know that we had a crew at the hospital and a two-way radio that looked like something from a C.W. McCall video. Our crew alerted us that at least 2 had arrived from the oil rig fire. Police in Montgomery said there was nothing to see. Big business in Midland said there was nothing to see. But there was something to see. There was a trend I experienced from Montgomery, Alabama to Midland, Texas, of people involved in stories who wanted me to look the other way. After a little more than a year and a half in Texas, I saw a job opening for a reporter in Alabama that caught my attention. I got the job. My wife and I packed our small amount of belongings into a trailer and headed to our next stop. A bureau reporter in Tuscaloosa, Alabama for the ABC affiliate in Birmingham. My wife and I were enjoying the day off in our Tuscaloosa apartment. The day was September 23rd. I had just popped open a beer and tossed chicken on a small grill in the backyard on the ground floor apartment while my 8-pound dog ran in circles hoping I would drop something. My wife told me my pager, yes, pager, was buzzing on the table. It was a message from the newsroom notifying me that I was now on standby for breaking news. I called and was told there may have been an underground mine explosion. Simultaneously, a collection of Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's deputies zipped past my apartment, which was perched off a busy highway leading to what we called the Brookwood Mines. I set the beer aside, pulled the chicken off the grill, and got dressed. A few minutes later, I was in the car heading to the mines. As I pulled up, the entrance was blocked by deputies. My photographer pulled up and looked at me in a way that we both knew it was not good. You could feel it. As time passed, family members of the men working underground were asking me for information. The fact they were even talking to me was significant. Miners are tough, loyal, and private people who don't trust those outside their circle. On this day, I was in the circle and felt empowered to get answers from them. On this day, I was in the circle and felt empowered to get answers for them, not my viewers. As the hours and even days passed, information would trickle out slowly. The national media barely touched on the incident. 13 men died deep inside mine number 5. Company representatives would meet privately with family, which was just fine, then tell the media there was nothing to report. Company officials tried to get the media kicked off the area, but it didn't work. The company refused to grant interviews. The company claimed there was no information to release. The company called it an unfortunate incident. It was another massive company that tried to explain to me there was nothing to see. People in a position of power tried to deflect questions and brush off the big story. The trend would continue. There was something to see, and from experience, I was prepared for what to expect on a big story. The experiences would later come in handy. After a few years in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, Alabama, I applied for a reporter position in Phoenix, Arizona. My wife, small dog, and I were off to the desert. This time, the whole world would see that I wasn't going to be told there's nothing to see here. My experience from college football to Montgomery to Midland to Birmingham prepared me extensively for the moment I broke the story. of the secret meeting on the tarmac. Norman told me early in my career, if you got the goods, you're good to go. The goods came at me in the form of a phone call. So that was chapter 1. And stick around for the next one. I'll be making it tomorrow. So long.